up? I'm Schoko, and today we're watching Killed in 4 milliseconds. Killed in 4 milliseconds. America's Deadliest Nuclear Accident by Storefed. Storefed. Here we go.
January 3rd, 1961. Emergency responders are dispatched to the SL-1 reactor after heat sensors triggered an alarm at 9:01 p.m. They already responded to 2 false alarms earlier that day, expecting this one to be the same. However, they have no idea that they are about to walk into the most gruesome nuclear accident in United States history.
Oh, in United States? Yo, there was a nuclear accident in the United States.
After the Christmas holidays, Army specialists Richard Leroy McKinley, John A. Burns, and Navy CB construction electrician Richard C. Legg began restarting the SL-1 nuclear reactor at the National Reactor Testing Station near Idaho.
Is it using that new system with the rods and the water cooling, rods moving between them in and out kind of style?
Reactor testing station near Idaho Falls, which had been taken offline for the holidays. The most important part of this procedure required manually lifting the central control rod just 4 inches to reconnect it to its drive mechanism before SL-1 could start producing power again. As Burns reached down to lift the 84-pound rod with his bare hands, Legg, who was the shift supervisor, stood beside him on top of the 9-foot reactor, while trainee McKinley observed close by. However, the 3 young technicians had no idea a reactor designed to produce 3 megawatts of thermal power is about to surge to nearly 20 gigawatts in just 4 milliseconds, turning their simple task into something far more horrifying. A surge of almost 7,000 times the reactor's design power should have been impossible.
Position? Hang on. Position of the crew and condition of nuclear head just after the accident. So they're like one there, one there, one there. 3 of them, right? Hi, Sticky Fanboy. How you doing? Welcome.
But the stationary low-power reactor number 1, or SL-1, wasn't an ordinary reactor. It was an experimental military design.
Control rod drive, control rod motor. Yeah, so we're gonna have them come in and out. Concrete shield. Laminated steel shield. Dry mixture shield. Instrument well operating floor. So this is where they're operating on. Normal water level is where they'll cool it with the water. Control rod, clear structure. It's a decent distance. Activate cooler. Pressure vessel, thermal shield, burl shield, dry mixture shield, and gravel shield. They have a lot of layers of shields, which is really good.
Developed on a crash timeline for remote Cold War radar stations across North America's
It's like Alaska, Canada, Greenland, United States.
Most isolated regions as part of early warning systems against Soviet bombers. However, supplying these sites with power proved near impossible as they were cut off from power grids, isolated from transport links, and subject to extreme cold during winter. Rather than abandoning the program, the military contracted nuclear specialists at Argonne National Laboratory to design SL-1, an easy-to-transport, small-scale boiling water reactor, which allowed the stations to generate heat and electricity entirely on their own.
That's possible? You can have a traveling reactor? I think that's more dangerous. Contaminant structure, reactor vessel, control rods, right there. Turbine generator, condenser.
But its practical design created deadly vulnerabilities.
Yep, that's what I thought.
In order for the reactor to run for years without refueling, the engineers loaded SL-1 with 14 kilograms, about 30 pounds, of highly enriched 93% uranium-235 to keep the station operating for up to 3 years. This was a higher concentration of
dang. So they use really strong uranium for this.
Uranium than the contents of the Hiroshima bomb. making SL1's core so sensitive.
Stronger than even a bomb that devastated Hiroshima. Wow. Okay, no, that is like Hiroshima. Oh my goodness. Control rod, a drive mechanism, dry shield mixture, steam outlet nozzle, upper spray ring, water inlet, rivet fastening of a shouldering tool. I'm not sure what that says. Holders, hold down box, core staunchings, small dummy control rod, and number 4 position, lower spray ring, core support grid, core support lung, thermal shield support lung.
That even small movements of its control rods caused sudden, dangerous spikes in power.
Oh, no.
To address this issue, engineers introduced thin boron aluminum burnable poison strips inside the reactor core. These strips absorbed excess neutrons, which slowed the rate of nuclear fission and theoretically would prevent the sudden power spikes while helping the reactor operate safely for longer. However, this was a new and untested idea, and over time, extreme heat and corrosion could cause pieces of the boron to break off and slip into the narrow gaps around the fuel, jamming the channels the control rods had to move through. And unfortunately for the 3 men, this is exactly what started to happen. Between February 1959 and December 1960, SL1's control rods jammed over 80 times.
80 times? Oh no! The concentration! These persistent failures served as an unheeded warnings for the reactor's mechanical stability. Despite these technical red flags, the facility continued operations until the 1961 disaster. Bruh. They were waiting for a disaster to happen at that point.
Times. To make things even worse, unlike commercial reactors sealed inside thick concrete containment structures, SL1 operated inside a thin, steel-walled building called ARA 602, whose unsealed outer shell was intended mainly to keep out the weather and serve as part of the cooling system, not to contain an accident. On top of that, instead of having permanent shielding made of thick, dense materials to absorb deadly gamma rays and high-energy neutrons around the radioactive core, the men had only a few movable lead blocks for protection and often stood just a few feet away from the small 4x4 reactor.
That's not gonna
With
help.
so little shielding, their radiation exposure near the vessel exceeded a modern worker's entire annual safety limit in just minutes. Despite building a facility that pushed the limits of safety, officials went ahead with their plan to use ordinary recruits to operate SL1. So Argonne incorporated a simplified control system that could be taught on an intensive 9-month Army qualification program. As a result, SL1 relied on just 5 cruciform control rods to manage its power output. This was highly unusual. For comparison, Chernobyl reactor number 4 used 211, and the arrangement of the limited number of control rods meant that the central rod was extremely powerful. It was positioned directly above the core's highest concentration of neutrons, and if it were withdrawn just a few inches too far, it could drive the reactor into a prompt critical state with deadly consequences. No single control rod should be powerful enough to shut a reactor down or start it up all by itself. But at SL1, everything that followed came down to that central control rod. You see, in order to generate electricity, nuclear reactors use fuel rods, or in SL1's case, fuel plates that contain nuclear material. These materials naturally emit particles as they decay, producing a tiny amount of heat. But when these fuel plates are brought close together, like in a nuclear reactor, the released particles react with the other nearby fuel, setting off a chain reaction called nuclear fission that generates massive amounts of heat. To control this reaction, control rods are used to absorb those particles. By moving these rods up or down inside the reactor, the rate of the chain reaction, and therefore the amount of heat produced, can be precisely controlled. Reactors then use this heat to turn water into steam, and steam into electricity. Operators at SL1 were aware of how this worked, but it's uncertain if they were aware of just how sensitive that central rod was.
Nah, the fact that they continue to use it even though it was decayed, it had multiple malfunctions. And they're like, nah, we can still continue to push this. This is fine. There's no worries. When I see something get corrosive, it's either replaced or cleaned, so you remove the corrosion. If it still has it, it's done for. How are they ever going to do anything about this? And the other problem is the fact that, it goes off after the too much power in that one control rod. Of course I'm alive.
Since they were just ordinary technicians, and this is when things became extremely dangerous. Before the holidays, SL-1 was made subcritical by fully inserting its control rods into the core. While it was technically offline, this didn't stop nuclear reactions entirely. A low level of fission still took place inside the reactor, meaning it was as vulnerable to control rod movement as it was during.
No. So the fission wasn't working. Neutron, target nucleus, fission product, neutron, fission project.
Meaning it was as vulnerable to control rod movement as it was during normal operation. As Burns began restarting the reactor, he tried to lift the central control rod number 9 from SL-1's core. But instead of the intended 4 inches, he, for whatever reason, yanked it 20 inches.
Oh.
Within 4 milliseconds, SL-1 went prompt critical. With nothing keeping fission in check, the raised control rod triggered an unstoppable chain reaction, devastating the lightweight reactor. Neutrons multiplied like wildfire as SL-1's power output surged past 20,000 megawatts. The massive burst of energy flash-boiled coolant water around the core's fuel, transforming it into superheated radioactive steam. Pressure inside the vessel instantly spiked from 20.4 atmospheres to over 650 atmospheres, and as the steam expanded, a violent explosion slammed the
Dang! So they fully got exploded and radioactive gas. Oh yeah, nobody's surviving this. Nobody's surviving this. It's over. It's done.
Remaining water into the top of the reactor with so much force that the 26,000-pound vessel jumped 9 feet into the air.
Dang!
Burns, who was right next to the reactor, was slammed against a concrete wall as SL-1 ripped apart, while metal shards catapulted in all directions, severely.
So this happened to Richard. Got stabbed straight through by the control rod. Richard flung probably in the air, and John also flung. At least they flung to the sides, but they're not surviving that.
Injuring McKinley, but the chaos wasn't over yet. The blast violently ejected the steel shield plugs from the top of the reactor, unleashing radioactive water and debris all over the 3 men, and propelling one of the control rods upwards towards Richard's leg, impaling him through the groin and out his shoulder. Meanwhile,
imagine getting stabbed through the groin with a rod.
Heat sensors above the reactor triggered an alarm, immediately alerting the National Reactor Testing Station Fire Department 8 miles away. The firemen had already responded to false alarms from the facility that morning and afternoon, so they expected this to be yet another one. However, at 9:17 p.m., when a health physicist and the assistant fire chief entered the adjacent building wearing air tanks and masks and approached the reactor building stairs, their radiation detectors jumped to 25 Rontgens per hour. Unable to believe the radiation levels could be that high, and suspecting their detectors were faulty, they were forced to retreat. After grabbing a higher range detector, they returned and carefully ascended the stairs. But this time, the meter maxed out at 500 Rontgens per hour. They managed
They were maxed out every single time they went in there? Oh no. They shouldn't even try going in there. It maxed out on the first machine and then it maxed out on the second machine. Thank you so much for that, Bats.
Quick look into the reactor room and saw scattered debris, but no sign of the missing operators. With radiation levels reaching dangerous doses within minutes, they retreated once again. It took the emergency responders over an hour to plan and attempt a full entry into the reactor. By 10:30 p.m., the lead health physicist and operations supervisor arrived on site. But halfway up the stairs, they heard faint moaning. Quickly making their way into the reactor room, they found McKinley barely alive, and a second operator, Burns, with no detectable pulse. Joined by 3 more health physicists, the team returned with a stretcher and successfully evacuated McKinley. He was loaded into a panel truck, then rushed into an ambulance. But before the ambulance reached the nearby Highway 20, McKinley was pronounced dead. The contaminated ambulance, still carrying his body, was driven into the desert and abandoned for several hours. In the meantime, the third operator...
driven in the desert for several hours? Wait, why?
Ambulance. But before the ambulance reached the nearby Highway 20, McKinley was pronounced dead. The contaminated ambulance, still carrying his body, was driven into the desert and abandoned for several hours. In the meantime, the third operator was still missing.
What about the person that drove it? Wouldn't they be contaminated? Like, how would that work?
But recovering him would be anything but simple. After evacuating McKinley, 4 firemen entered the building at 10:38 p.m. and made their way into the reactor room, but found no sign of leg among the destruction. It was only when one of them scanned the ceiling with a flashlight that responders realized what they thought was debris was actually leg, impaled and pinned to the ceiling above the reactor by the number 7 shield plug. However, his radioactive body couldn't simply be pulled down. Doing so risked the shield plug that pinned him falling back into the open reactor core, dislodging fuel elements and triggering a second criticality event. To make it even worse, leg was positioned in the most radioactive part of the room, with meter readings capping at 1,000 rontgens per hour. Anyone standing directly beneath him faced a lethal dose within minutes. With no safe course of action, a team of specialists began designing the equipment needed to reach Leg and Burns without endangering rescuers. Burns' body could be removed by the next day on January 4th and be taken to the same facility as McKinley for decontamination, leaving the most dangerous recovery yet. It would take almost a week before Leg's body could be reached, as engineers designed a special stretcher system suspended from a crane outside. When everything was finally ready on January 9th, small teams entered in short rotations, each spending no more than 65 seconds inside the reactor.
65 seconds? That's like 1 minute. How can you spend only that long? Like, that's so short. How can you even get anything done? No, that's crazy. I know it's like due to radiation exposure and then not wanting to get radiation on them and everything like that, but still.
Reactor room. The plan meant they would receive non-lethal doses of radiation, around 27 rontgens, but still enough to raise their lifetime cancer risk. Using long, hooked poles, they pried Leg free from the shield plug without standing beneath him, guiding his body into the suspended stretcher. The crane operator lifted him clear of the room, and Leg was taken to the same facility as the others, where all 3 men were prepared for burial in lead-lined caskets.
Outline diagram of the topographical radiological surveys of the 3 men before autopsy. The figures are RHR at the surface, and the figures in the parentheses are the readings after the autopsy, debridement, and shaving. Final radioactivity after the shielding with lead is indicated along the side of the left of the foot of each man. 650? 450? 450? So who had the most radiation? Oh, of course. The groin area. Most radiation right there.
It's sealed inside metal vaults and covered with concrete. Investigators could never determine exactly why the control rod was lifted more than 4 times higher than intended. The most likely cause was that a mechanical jam likely forced the men to pull harder, while rumors later speculated about personal tensions, including an alleged affair, none of which were proven. Whatever the reason, the 3 operators were all in their 20s, with Burns just 22. The disaster ended the Army's top-secret portable nuclear power program and transformed reactor design, leading to new safety systems, stricter training, and the one-rod rule that ensures such a tragedy can never happen again. Today, SL1 remains the only fatal reactor accident in American history.
Wow, only one in American history. That's impressive. Lest we forget SL1 1361. And I have all this scrapped up. That was amazing. Really liked this video. It was very informative, but also very sad. I hope you guys liked the video as much as I did. Like, comment, share, subscribe! And we'll see each other next time. Bye-bye.